The rain started before midnight and arrived hard enough to erase the road. I had been driving for 2 hours through county backroads after leaving a friend's place out past the city limits. The storm rolled in quickly, swallowing distant hills and telephone poles one by one until the world became headlights and water. Sheets of rain hammered my windshield so violently that even the wipers felt useless, scraping back and forth with a frantic rhythm that never quite cleared anything. Then I saw the convenience store. Its parking lot sat alone beside the highway like it had been dropped there and forgotten. The place looked old even through the rain. Yellowed fluorescent lights, cracked pavement filled with black water, faded advertisements pasted inside the windows. The neon sign above the entrance glowed weakly through the storm. Mart. Half the letters flickered. I pulled in mostly because I needed coffee and partly because I couldn't stand staring into that endless wall of rain any longer. The second I stepped out of my car, cold water soaked through my shoes. Wind shoved rain sideways beneath the awning, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and ozone. Thunder rolled somewhere overhead. Inside, warmth hit me first. Not comfortable warmth. The stale kind. The air smelled faintly of coffee that had been sitting too long and old mop water. The place was empty. No music played. No customers wandered the aisles. Just rows of shelves beneath humming fluorescent lights. Behind the register sat a man who looked about 60. Thin face, reading glasses. He barely looked up from his magazine. "Storm's bad," I said. He nodded. "Looks that way." That was it. I grabbed a cup and filled it from the coffee machine near the back. Outside, rain streamed down the windows in wavering rivers. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the neon sign outside lit brighter. I frowned. The sign didn't say Mart anymore. It said wait. Then darkness returned. I blinked. Another second later, the sign returned to Mart. I stared. Maybe I'd imagined it. Lightning does strange things with reflections. I laughed quietly to myself and took my coffee to the counter. The cashier glanced up. "You staying until it slows?" "Probably." He nodded again. Thunder cracked overhead. A brighter flash this time. I looked instinctively toward the window. The sign now read, "Stay." My smile faded. Then darkness swallowed it. Mart returned. I stared for another moment. The cashier noticed. "What?" "The sign outside." He looked toward the window. "What about it?" I hesitated. "Nothing." Because I suddenly felt stupid. Neon flickers. Storms distort things. Reflections overlap. I paid for my coffee and sat near the front windows. Outside looked unreal. Rainwater reflected the parking lot lights so that the asphalt appeared liquid and bottomless. Lightning turned every puddle silver for an instant before plunging everything back into darkness. Thunder rattled the glass. Minutes passed. The silence inside the store slowly started bothering me. Not because it was completely silent, because it wasn't. There were little sounds. Tiny ones. The refrigerator motors humming. The occasional click from the ceiling lights. The rustle of pages turning as the cashier read. And somewhere deeper in the store, a soft movement, like plastic shifting. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. Just aisles stretching toward the back. I told myself it was air moving through vents. Thunder exploded overhead. Flash. The sign read, "Look." I sat upright. My coffee suddenly felt cold in my hand. The word vanished. Mart returned. I stared through the window for several seconds. Then I slowly turned around. The aisles sat empty beneath pale fluorescent lights. Candy, chips, cleaning supplies, nothing else. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not visibly, just something. Like entering a room and realizing a conversation had stopped before you walked in. I stood and wandered toward the shelves. My footsteps sounded oddly loud. The farther I walked from the front counter, the more isolated the store felt. The fluorescent hum seemed louder back there. The ceiling lights flickered once, then steadied. I passed the refrigerated section and paused. The glass doors reflected the aisle behind me. For a moment I thought I saw movement, just a dark shape crossing between shelves. I spun around. Nothing. No one. I stared another few seconds before laughing quietly. Nerves, I muttered. The word sounded strange in the empty store. I headed back toward the front. The cashier looked up. You okay? Thought I heard somebody. He stared at me for a second, then looked around. We're alone. Something about how quickly he answered bothered me. Not his words, his expression, like he hadn't actually checked. Lightning flashed. The sign outside read, "Hide." My stomach tightened. I stood immediately. What the hell? The cashier looked over. Something wrong. The sign changed again. He frowned. What sign? I stopped, because he looked genuinely confused. I stared at him. Then outside. Mart. Normal again. I swallowed. Never mind. Thunder rolled farther away this time. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. Rain hammered the windows harder. Time crawled. I sat back down. The cashier returned to reading. Minutes passed. Then I noticed something strange. The reflections. The front windows reflected the inside of the store because of the darkness outside. I could see myself sitting there. I could see shelves, the counter, the cashier. I froze, because something else stood in the reflection. Far back near the rear aisle. Tall, dark, perfectly still. I turned immediately. Nothing. Empty shelves. My pulse thudded. I looked back at the glass. Nothing there now. Just reflections. I stood. The cashier was watching me. Not reading anymore. Watching. You sure you're okay? I nodded slowly. Then I looked toward the windows. Lightning flashed. The sign read, "You." Cold spread across my skin. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Because for the first time I understood. The words weren't random. Wait. Stay. Look. Hide. You. Instructions. Warnings. I turned toward the back of the store. Toward the long aisles disappearing beneath flickering lights. Something moved. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just the slight shift of darkness between shelves. Like someone leaning back out of sight. I looked at the cashier. He was staring at me. Not blinking. Then I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. He hadn't looked toward the back. Not once. Not even when I said I heard someone. Not even when I reacted. He'd only looked at me. Thunder shook the building. Lightning flashed again. The sign read, "Behind." I spun around instantly. Nothing. Empty air. Shelves. Candy racks. Silence. I stood there breathing hard. Then very slowly I turned back toward the counter. The cashier wasn't there anymore. His magazine sat open. His chair rocked gently. Back and forth. Back and forth. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember shoving through the door. Rain instantly soaked me. I splashed across the parking lot toward my car. Lightning flashed overhead. I looked at the sign one last time, and my feet stopped moving, because it wasn't a word anymore. It was my name. And beneath it, another flash revealed one final change. Not a word, just a number. 6. It was the kind of storm that made the world feel smaller. Rain had started around 10, and by midnight it had swallowed the town whole. Water struck the windows of the convenience store in hard, relentless sheets, blurring the parking lot into streaks of silver and black. Every few minutes lightning illuminated the empty gas pumps outside, turning them into pale skeletons before darkness reclaimed them. I was working the overnight shift. Small town, small store. Nothing ever happened after 11. Usually I spent the hours restocking shelves, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, and waiting for morning. The fluorescent lights hummed constantly overhead. It was a sound most people probably tuned out after a while, but during storms I always noticed it. The electricity seemed strained somehow. The bulbs buzzed and flickered faintly whenever thunder rolled overhead. Water leaked through one corner of the ceiling near the freezer section. Drip, drip, drip. Someone from maintenance was supposed to fix it. Tile floors reflected the overhead lights in warped white lines. The stale air carried the smell of old coffee and wet cardboard. Just after 1 in the morning, I heard the bell above the door. I looked up. A woman stepped inside. She wore a dark coat soaked through with rain. Wet strands of hair clung to her face and neck. She looked maybe mid-30s. Something felt strange immediately. Not because of how she looked, because of how she moved. People entering from heavy rain usually paused beneath the lights. They shook off water, rubbed their arms. She didn't. She simply walked inside and stood there, staring. Not at me, at the aisles. I waited a few seconds. "Rough night?" I asked. She looked at me slowly. Her expression was difficult to read. Tired maybe. No, not tired. Exhausted. The kind that sits behind the eyes. Then she said, "Oh, thank God." Her voice shook. "I thought I'd never get out." I frowned. "Get out of where?" She stared at me. "Aisle 4. I blinked. "What?" "Aisle 4. Thunder cracked outside. For several seconds, only the hum of fluorescent lights filled the store. Then I laughed awkwardly. "You just walked in." Her expression didn't change. "No." She swallowed. "I've been trapped in aisle 4 for 3 days." I stared at her. Rain hammered the windows. Drip, drip, drip. The leak near the freezer continued. I looked toward aisle 4 automatically. Just shelves of canned soup, pasta, snacks. Normal. I looked back. The woman hadn't moved. "You came through the front door," I said. "I saw you." Her eyes shifted toward the entrance. Then confusion crossed her face. "No," she whispered it. "No, I didn't." I almost asked if she was okay. Maybe she'd gotten into an accident. Maybe she was confused. But something about her expression stopped me. Because she wasn't acting irrational. She looked terrified. Terrified people don't usually look dramatic. They're quiet. Very quiet. "I was buying aspirin," she said. "I turned into aisle 4. She stared at nothing. "And then," her face tightened, "I couldn't find the end anymore." Lightning flashed outside. The store lights flickered. For half a second shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor. Then everything returned. I forced a smile. "You probably got turned around." She looked at me. "No." Her voice dropped. "There were clocks." "What?" "In the aisle." I frowned. "There aren't clocks in aisle 4. "I know." Silence settled between us. Then she looked directly at me. "How long have you worked here?" 2 years. "And you've never noticed?" "Noticed what?" She glanced toward aisle 4 again. "The shadows." A cold sensation crept up my back. Because I had noticed something. Not consciously. Just small things. Things I'd ignored. Products ending up on wrong shelves. Boxes I didn't remember stocking. Brief moments where I could have sworn something moved in my peripheral vision. Nothing important. Nothing real. Thunder rolled overhead. The lights flickered again. For an instant I saw movement in aisle 4. A shape crossing between shelves. I stood. "What?" The woman stared. "You saw it." I looked at her. "No." "Yes, you did." I walked around the counter. "Aisle 4 is right there." I pointed. "See." She didn't move. I headed toward it. Mostly to prove something. Mostly to stop myself from feeling stupid. The tile floor reflected pale ceiling lights beneath my feet. As I got closer, the fluorescent hum seemed louder somehow. The air felt colder too. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. I reached aisle 4. Soup cans, crackers, pasta boxes. Normal. I looked back toward the register. The woman stood exactly where she'd been. Watching me, I smiled. Nothing here. Then I looked down. A can of soup sat on the floor beside me. Chicken noodle. Its label looked faded. Very faded. Almost sun-bleached. I bent down and picked it up. The expiration date caught my eye. 3 years ago. I frowned. That wasn't possible. We rotated inventory constantly. I turned toward the shelf. Every can looked normal. Except, I froze. There was an empty space. Exactly where the can should have been. I stared. Something felt wrong. Not with the shelf. With me. because I suddenly couldn't remember stocking this aisle. I knew I had. I stocked every aisle. But when I tried recalling it, nothing came, just a strange blank space, like a skipped section of a movie. Thunder shook the building. The lights flickered. For one instant, I wasn't standing in aisle 4. I was standing outside. Morning sunlight shone through the windows. Customers moved through the store. Someone laughed near the coffee machines. Then, darkness. Fluorescent lights. Rain. Night. I stumbled backward. My heart hammered. I looked around. Same aisle. Same shelves. But my watch read 2:14. I stared. A second ago it had been 1:22. Hadn't it? Hadn't it? Cold spread through me. I looked toward the register. The woman was gone. Panic hit instantly. Hello? Nothing. I hurried toward the front. The register sat empty. No woman. No footprints. No door chime. Outside rain continued pouring. No one crossing the parking lot. No car. Nothing. I stared. Then I heard a voice. Behind me. You understand now. I turned. She stood near aisle 4. Except, no, not near it. Inside it. Halfway down. The lights overhead flickered weakly. I found the end once, she said softly. I walked toward her. What is happening? She stared at me. I think. Her voice trembled. I think sometimes time forgets where to go. Thunder cracked violently overhead. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard refrigerators humming. Rain against glass. Dripping water. Then emergency lights blinked on. Dim red illumination filled the store. The woman was gone. I stood breathing hard. Aisle 4 stretched ahead. Empty. Then I noticed something. The aisle looked longer. Just slightly. I stared. No, not longer. That wasn't right. I started walking. Halfway down I stopped. There should have been an end by now. I kept walking. Soup. Pasta. Snacks. Soup. Pasta. Snacks. Again. And again. And again. My breathing quickened. No. No, no, no. I turned around. The front counter looked impossibly distant. Farther than it should. I started walking back. Fast. Then running. My shoes slapped against tile. The fluorescent hum grew louder. Drip. 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 I reached the end of the aisle. Relief hit instantly. Until I looked up. Because I wasn't at the front of the store. I was standing at the beginning of aisle 4 again. I stared. My chest tightened. No. I turned. Ran again. Same shelves. Same products. Same reflections beneath pale lights. Again. 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 Finally I stopped. Breathing hard. Somewhere nearby the store bell rang. A customer entering. I felt hope surge through me. I heard footsteps. Then a familiar voice. Young. Male. My own voice. Rough night, it said. Silence. Then a woman answered shakily. Oh, thank God. I thought I'd never get out.